You're good.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Remington with the Duval City Council. Today is Tuesday, February 16th. It's now 5:03. We're going to call to order our City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. Our first item is a closed session for collective bargaining. So I'll invite council members to leave this meeting, and we'll go to our collective bargaining closed session. And for those that may be listening, we'll be back here. We're looking at about a 30-minute time period with the negotiator. So we'll see you in 30 minutes. If it's longer than that, Jody Wyckoff will announce that to everyone to keep you updated. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you. You can leave this meeting and go to our calendar where we have the invite. So we are reconvening our City Council Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, February 16th. We were in a closed session for bargaining. Our next item is good of the order. Council, unless I hear objection, I'd like to move that after our water system financial review because we have guests here this evening, and I'm just want to be real respectful of their time in joining us. So if I don't have anyone object, we'll move on to that item with Steve Laniszewski and Murray Smith. Steve, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. So we have a group tonight with Murray Smith as well as the FCS Group Financial Consultant Services Group. So John Giarladucci and Tagi Aker are going to walk us through the bulk of that. I can't remember, correct me if I'm wrong, John, one of you turns into a pumpkin or both of you at 6?
Tagi turns into a pumpkin at 6.
Okay.
So if we can, I'll share my screen so that if he has to leave.
And he's off at another city council meeting, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think we're just going to jump right in. We've gone over some of the items in part previously, and we've talked about the plan. Murray Smith has been available at the last meeting. We hope to move forward with, talking pockets on council meetings so we can, I know there's a lot of documentation to digest, which we totally support, and taking time. We're not in a super hurry, but we want to keep moving forward. So the council meetings will have a little bump of time on them just to talk about things that we don't necessarily cover if we're not on the cow, and go from there. So Sean, is there anything else to intro before we let John start in here, or just let him go?
No, yeah, I think you covered it. I think a lot for this is we're just going to kind of slowly roll this out. So we fully expect, questions that we'll follow up with, and then some more lead-in opportunities. So, but yeah, no further ado, we can let FCS take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll lead it off here, and then Tagi will pick it up with the actual results. Let's see if I can advance the slide. There we go. So I'll talk through some introductory slides, and then as part of the revenue requirement discussion, Tagi will talk about the fiscal policies, the capital program summary, the capital funding strategy that is reflected in that revenue requirement. We have some survey results from neighboring communities, and then the rate forecast and proposed next steps. So if you'll focus on that middle rectangle, the revenue requirement, that's really the focus of our work and the focus for tonight. The revenue requirement is the determination of how much money is needed from rates in order to meet all the different financial obligations of the water service. So the key inputs are on the left there. There are policy goals that are reflected in that revenue requirement number, having to do with minimum fund balances, fund balance targets that you want to meet at the end of every year. The operating and maintenance costs, that's the operating budget, ongoing salaries and costs having to do with maintaining the system. Capital projects, and those are all obligations of the revenue requirement. you'll see right below that revenue requirement rectangle, GFCs, those are general facilities charges. Because the city of Duval has grown so much, general facilities charges are a substantial revenue for capital projects, and those are the one-time fees paid at the time of development by new development. So they actually reduce the burden on the ratepayers. That's why we're showing them as an input to that revenue requirement. So once we have that revenue requirement number, which is a forecast of any needed rate adjustments, then we're in front of you tonight, and we'll document it all in a report chapter. So the system is complex. There are, for a smaller city, 5 different pressure zones, 42 miles of water mains. The city gets its water from Seattle Public Utilities, the city of Seattle, although it stores a substantial amount in its own storage facilities, reservoirs. The city has grown a lot. I mentioned, as you're well aware, almost 800, a little over 800 connections in the last 10 years. About almost 3,200 equivalent residences. So that includes commercial customers converted to residential equivalents as of 2019. Average demand, a little over 500,000 gallons per day. Maximum day demand, a little over 1 million gallons per day. And I mentioned GFCs, those connection charges that new development pay. General facilities charges are a substantial revenue for the city when it's growing. They're a volatile source of revenue, but substantial when the city is growing. So these are the current rates. We're showing 2020 and then 2021 with a 1.6% increase that was applied in January. So a modest increase from 20 to 21. The fixed charge plus a tiered volume rate structure, the rates go up for successively higher amounts of usage. And this is the general facilities charge schedule that goes up by meter size. That was this schedule was also increased by 1.6% from 2020 to 2021. Most of your single family residences are at that 5/8 by 3/4 inch meter size. So this is a profile of where the revenue, where the costs are, and where the revenue comes from for 2020. So if you look at the revenue side on the left, you see water charges. That's water rate revenue, a little over $2 million a year in 2020. If you compare that to operating expenditures on the right, you'll see, and this is a really good thing, that water rate revenues exceed operating expenses. That's what you want. One of the things that's really unique about the city of Duval in 2020, in that left-hand pie, you see water general facilities charges of almost $1.5 million, well in excess of capital expenditures in 2020. That's a great position to be in when you can rely on growth to occur at those levels. We'll see in one of the slides that Tagi shows you how volatile growth can be and GFCs. There's a reliance on combined funding from GFCs and from rates in the forecast.
All right, thanks, John. So as a quick review, we're doing a similar approach to what we did in the sewer utility a few weeks ago. But as a quick refresher, I want to provide an introduction to utility rate making. And what we're trying to do here is set rates to recover the cost of providing service. And as John noted, we have operating costs, tend to be a little bit more regular, ongoing, based on the adopted operating budget. And then we also have capital costs based on the capital improvement program, and depending on the year and what types of projects are being funded in any given year, the capital costs can be up or down, whereas operating costs are typically more steadily increasing each year. Next slide, please. So when you put it all together, how much revenue is needed for the water utility, we looked at three main components. One is fiscal policy achievement. That's your operating reserve, your capital reserve. Want to make sure that you're covering your operating costs as well as incorporating into rate revenue a portion that's earmarked for capital projects so that you're able to rate fund some portion of your capital program each year to supplement general facilities charges. And that combined is your annual revenue needs. So current policy for the city right now is about $700,000. It's currently set up to be used for operating and/or capital contingencies. What we've done is we've taken a look at trying to separate those two into two distinct reserves. One is the operating reserve, and second is the capital reserve. So we're recommending an operating reserve that's based on a number of days of operating expenses. And for the water utility, that's 60 to 90 days. So based on the 2021 operating budget, that tops out at about $540,000. This is working capital, essentially there to meet daily operating and maintenance expenditures. Sometimes when you have to pay the bills, revenues come in at different times. So it's there to provide a liquidity cushion for the utility. Above and beyond that is a capital reserve. And this is monies set aside so that in the event that there's unexpected capital projects, some sort of emergency repairs, or just general cost overruns on planned capital projects, that you have something in place to respond to those emergencies and without disrupting the finances of the utility or other funds at the city. So we recommend this be based on a percentage of fixed assets of the utility, 1 to 2% in this case, which tops out at about $740,000. So looking at the operating fund, note again the operating reserve target of about $540,000 there, shown in that dashed green line. Beginning balances at the beginning of the year were well in excess of that. So anything above that dashed line could be used for planned capital projects as it's above that minimum reserve. On the capital fund side of things, also healthy. Capital reserve there you see with that green dashed line, about $740,000, beginning year balance of $2.6 million. So the city has healthy reserves to go along with healthy growth, and you'll see that shown in a couple of slides when we talk about the capital funding strategy. So when we're looking at the capital funding strategy, we've taken the capital projects that Murray Smith provided with the assistance of city staff. Over the 20-year period, it's just over $19 million of capital projects. Today, we're focusing on the first 10 years that goes through 2030. That's about $11.7 million. And as you can see on the next slide, there are capital projects, where you have years at the $1 million level. Towards the beginning of the forecast period, there's a couple of years that exceed $1.5 million. And then you'll have other years that are below $500,000 or less. So it really depends on how many capital projects are occurring any given year. But we've tried to highlight here a couple of notable projects. You've got the Tolt 2 supply line replacement. That's a multi-year project. Over in 2031, you'll see another note for the reservoir improvements. That's another multi-year project. And then in those out years, there's a water department building project. And then at the tail end of the forecast, an arsenic treatment project. And there are other projects, of course, that are within these bars, but wanted to call out a few notable projects and show the variable nature of the capital improvement program. Zooming in to the first 10 years of the forecast, remember that's $11.7 million. You can see the various types of projects that are included in the capital plan. You've got in the dark blue there, water main projects. In the purple bars there, you see some looping projects. Facilities are shown there in the lighter green. And then in that gold bar portion, you do have some citywide programs. And then it gives an idea of the different types of projects that are completed in any given year. So in order to fund that $11.7 million of capital projects, we looked at general facilities charges. We looked at the city's ability to draw down some existing reserves while still exceeding the minimum balance targets. Annual rates set aside for capital projects are also included. And then there is a decent amount that comes from annual cell tower leases that is a contributing factor for the capital funding strategy. So altogether, 59% of the strategy is from GFCs, 21% is forecast to come from reserves. Rates contribute about 14%, and then cell tower leases, those would contribute an additional 6%. So a lot of different sources going into the capital funding strategy here. As John mentioned earlier, this is the general facilities charge actual in the blue and forecasted in the green. So you can see off to the far left there in 2011 and 2012, a couple of years at roughly $500,000, dipped pretty low in 2014 and 15, and then has rebounded nicely in the next 5 years. And then 2020 was far and away the biggest year in recent history, over $1.4 million in general facilities charge revenue. So that contributes to in part to healthy cash balances. And then over the next 5 years, we're forecasting about 90 units per year, which would generate roughly $700,000 to $800,000 per year of general facilities charge revenue. And then in the latter half of the 10-year forecast, years 26 through 30, we're conservatively forecasting about 30 units per year of growth, which would generate about $300,000 of GFC revenue each year. So here's the revenue requirement forecast. What we're trying to do here is forecast the obligations of the utility on an annual basis. You can see in the dark bar there, that's your annual operating and maintenance expenditures. 2020 off to the left there, below 2 million, but with the 21 and 22 adopted budget, those annual operating costs bump to be a little bit over $2 million per year. On top of that, in most years, you'll see a set aside for rate funded capital. That's a part of our capital funding strategy. And so in order to fund both the operating and maintenance component of the forecast, as well as capital projects that are to be funded through annual rate revenues, we're forecasting annual rate adjustments of 2.5% per year. So for example, in 2021, the current single family monthly bill is just under $55 per month. With a 2.5% rate increase each year, the monthly bill would increase anywhere from $1.40 to $1.50 per year. That's how that 2.5% translates to a monthly single family bill. And that dashed line shows revenues at that 2.5% annual increase, allowing the utility to continue to fund its operating costs as well as generate some revenue that can be earmarked directly for capital projects. This graphic shows the ending fund balance for both the water operating and water capital funds. You can see currently on a combined basis, about $6 million drawn down gradually a little bit over time and ending at just over $3 million, well in excess of those minimum targets that are shown in the dashed green line. So some of that excess above the minimum target could and is planned to be used for future capital projects in the latter 10 years of the 20-year forecast. We did put together a single family monthly water rate comparison, comparing the city of Duval's rates with other cities in the area. So with that 1.6% rate increase that has already been put into place for 2021, the monthly single family bill would be just under $55 per month. That's above Monroe and Snohomish, you can see there on the left. But still, that $55 per month is below North Bend, Snoqualmie, Carnation, and the city of Sultan. And so what we see here is we take your existing rate schedule and apply these increases across the board. So we're applying the same rate adjustment to both the fixed and volume components of the forecast. So not only does the fixed charge increase by that 2.5% per year, but also the volume components in each of those tiers would also increase by 2.5% per year. So in conclusion, what we see here is, if you were to adopt the 2.5% rate increase for the water utility for 2022, and if you were to adopt the 2.5% increase that we're recommending for the sewer utility, and assuming an inflationary adjustment for the stormwater utility next year, the combined single family monthly bill, which in 2021 is $155.46, that would increase to $159.25. So about a $4 increase year over year with the 2.5% rate adjustment in each of water and sewer. And these adjustments would help the utilities, not only water, but sewer as well, cover the operating expenditures, as well as cash fund a portion of the capital program each year. And with that, we will take questions, and John will stick around for Q&A.
Questions, Council? Looks like Council Member Schaefer.
Yeah, thank you. How much are we at the mercy of Seattle as far as water costs are concerned? I know we have a contract with them. I'm not familiar with the details, but is it possible they can raise rates unexpectedly on us?
Steve, do you want to, I can't see you, but do you want to jump on that?
So we do have a contract with them, Rick. It's a 50-year contract. We're, I don't know, a strong 18 years, I think, into that contract. We do a 3-year true up with those folks. So normally it's not a big increase. For this year, for example, the true up is no increase.
Mm-hmm.
They do have a GFC that they did not previously have. So they do try to pass on some of the eligible costs for growth into the operational element to compensate for some of the projects down the road. So it's not all rate based. So we do collect that on each new unit in our system and then pass it to them on a monthly basis. It's a little over $1,000 a unit. But yeah, for the most part, it's fairly low, and we will be bringing back some amendments this year. We went through that contract in early 2000s, and there's just things that don't exist anymore that we need to change terminologies, but I have to get on that sooner than later and start bringing that forward. The goal is to have that reviewed by all of the wholesale customers, which is the greater East Side, and with SPU, and have that done by the end of the year. So it's pretty controlled. It is not wild by any means, but yeah,
Good.
there are little costs. But we pay wholesale rates, right? Not not retail.
Yeah, obviously I just want to make sure we should not experience any surprises from them.
Councilmember Lingle.
Okay, I can't really see anybody because the slide's still up. So I guess this tags on to the city of Seattle rate charges. Just to be sure I'm understanding about the GFC charge that's new. Since Seattle owns its water, my question would be, if they decide to increase the rates that they charge in Seattle for something even beyond the GFC, how would that impact Duval? And I asked that because I do recall a situation a number of years back where they decided to recalibrate. This would be before we had a contract with them, and it was a council decision there at that time to start looking at how they sold water differently. So are there, if they can add a GFC now, are there other types of replacements on their side if they are having shortages in reserves or decide to make other capital expenses? How are we protected from that? They could be charging their people quite a bit more, and then would that happen to us? Regardless of this agreement, I guess, if we're paying a wholesale rate, they're still paying themselves. I mean, if they have increases in operating costs, we can't control that. That's up to their council's budget.
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, and paraphrasing a little, so what I will do is I'll look at SPU's rate structure in our contract, and then also provide what other financial opportunities does SPU have to collect should they need to. Is that fair enough, Dot?
I think that's perfectly fair. And it does. I mean, Seattle, same with Seattle City Light. I mean, we don't have them, but you know, they are their own little world in Seattle. So it's just whatever other things where we might be vulnerable, because, you know, obviously we're entering a new phase in Duval's size, and we'll have to adjust for that on our utilities.
Yep. The good thing, the numerator and the denominator with SPU, we are minute. So
that is good.
But I'll dig those. Those are two simple questions we can get.
Yeah, there just can be no end to Seattle's appetite for expenditures in my experience.
I like that word, appetite. Yeah, it's fitting.
Yeah, they have an appetite for it.
Other questions, Council? Councilmember Naplin.
So I just have a repeat of the question I asked at the last meeting about the staffing requirements. I noticed there was a pretty big jump in operational costs, and I believe it was probably partly adding an additional staff member. When I look at the staffing requirements, it shows a very high staffing requirement for meter reading. And I think it's 2.5 employees full-time. And right now, I think we just spend a couple days a month driving around to read the meters. There might be some rereads in there. I don't know if 2.5 people are deployed full-time on doing that. The last time I brought it up, I think it was going to be reworked and looked at. I don't know if that's happened and has been reflected in what was presented today. I wasn't able to see any of this ahead of the meeting. We weren't provided with the presentation. So I've just had slide after slide after slide of numbers and graphs that I just, kind of hard. So I don't know if that's something that's been looked at. And it also says in the future, it will take 4 staff full-time to read meters. And my understanding is we have some capital projects planned that are supposed to reduce the amount of time to read meters. So it just didn't seem to be in alignment.
Yeah, Councilmember Naplin is Sean. And Steve, pop in anytime you want. So we talked about that a bit with Joe, and then also had some discussion with Murray Smith following that council meeting, just to kind of see where we were. And we agree that number sticks out like a sore thumb. But again, what we talked about a lot was that it was really all inclusive of a lot of meters. So it's meter reading, it's rereads, it's manual reads, it's shutoffs, it's turn-ons, it included a lot that was not just meter reading. So we discussed slightly about retitling it, but the level of effort for all things meter that it was encompassing was appropriate based on what operations had told us and some previous labor kind of forecasts and estimates that they've used. It seemed in alignment. So it is a simplified title. We considered naming it something, I don't know, we threw a couple names out. We haven't adjusted the title yet, but the level of effort seemed appropriate based on our conversations.
I think what's hard for me is that's the exact same number that was used, the amount of time per meter that was used 10 years ago in the plan. And clearly we've invested a lot of money in efficiencies, and I expect us to invest more. Going out and doing a shut off and a turn on is proposed to just be click of a mouse button. So it just seems a little weird that we would use the same 0.1 per meter of an hour per meter 10 years ago as now, as 10 years from now. It just doesn't make sense to me. We've spent a lot of money on efficiencies. Used to be you had to go and individually read each meter. Now, I mean, times have changed. So I understand what you're saying, that it encompasses a lot of things, but it's just hard for me to believe that with the capital projects that we're being asked to support, that there would not be some efficiencies from 10 years ago to 10 years into the future.
So a little bit of the history too, and please recall, like, we have Murray Smith, who's assisting us, who does this well more than we do, right? We do it every 6 to 10 years. They do it constantly. Part of the numbers are their representation and understanding of systems in our area. They're not exact. There are other things on that table, Councilmember Knapp, that are flipped the wrong way. So I wouldn't get consumed all. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's your choice. But I really wouldn't recommend we get consumed on one of these landing spots. The bottom line is I think we're well understaffed relative to the table, which is a takeaway. We're working towards capitalized efficiencies with systems, and that will be dramatic. There will be an implementation process and timeline, but that project you think you're referring to, the automated meter reading is on hold in a sense. It's in the budget, but it's going nowhere until we go further in those discussions. So we're trying to balance too, getting work done, deploying work that has to be done. Maybe we get some things that come in the future, but again, it's all encompassing system wide. So we could argue the opposite, that we don't have enough hours on that table for valve exercising. I really don't want to get mired in one item, and I hope you can appreciate that. There's many things that go into it. Utility billing clerk answers all the calls. That's part of the meter issues. There is a lot. I don't discredit that number may be high, but for a system in general, we do trust our consultants providing reasonable averages system-wide on FTE counts. So okay. I think we can all agree we don't have crew members sitting in trucks waiting for the next thing to do, right? I mean, no matter what element we're working on. So
okay. I'll move on. My next question was, we have a planned facility repair and some upgrade to house a lot of our staff that provides support for water, sewer, and storm. And I don't see a project that reflects that cost. And so funny thing is, it's actually in the packet for the regular council meeting, and it shows that all of that would be funded by REIT, which it just seems a little bit strange that you would use REIT money to pay for a building to house utility staff. So I feel a little bit concerned about that. I mean, if we've had to increase staff and we have those needs, perhaps that cost should be reflected in the plan as a capital cost and spread to GFC type expenses.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm not sure if we want to throw the slide back up and what year it was. It was out past year 10. So we're working in always multiple lanes. Yes, the programming shown for the REIT work currently was facilitated while we're going through this. I think in years 14 or beyond, we talk about our fair share of a improvement facility. There we go. I see Dot nodding ahead. I made a note of that.
Is it the one in 2035? I mean, I think in 15 years, whatever we do now is going to need to be changed possibly. And so we have that's coming up this year that I don't see reflected as a 2020 cost. Yeah, I think 15 years from now, a building we might need is a totally different story. And I think there is an immediate need right now that I don't see reflected.
And our intent is we show something in this programming which can assist and make it eligible to expend now? Because right now there isn't really anything on the books, right? So as we adopt the new CIP, we then become eligible to expend those funds on our needs. Kind of, it doesn't really matter what year per se, we always target a year, but it makes it an eligible type of expense.
Okay, because normally I think it's, we look at a 6-year CIP and within the 6 years we can do it. And so since this is 15 years out, I wasn't sure if you would be able to use GFC revenue to assist in paying for what we plan to do this year.
And John, you can jump in and talk about
I was gonna say, if you don't mind, John, if we put you on the spot, 'cause I think we actually legitimately talked about, hey, what if a portion of this expense was incurred in 2 years from now or 1 year from now? And I don't remember if you were in that conversation. I'm pretty sure you were. I saw Stephanie shaking her head. So, but if you can add or elaborate any of that.
Well, I don't remember exactly what we did with this as it pertains to the GFC, but anything on the list can be included in the general facilities charge, and you have the flexibility to move those projects around. It's just a cash flow question, whether the GFCs are there when needed. The city is in a really unique position in that it can fund $19 million in 20 years and about 12 million in the next 10 years with GFCs and rates and no debt. That's really remarkable. And it's because the utilities have been, the water service for tonight has been well managed, and because you've had GFCs in place and growth is helping to fund a lot of these and will help fund a lot of these planned improvements.
I'll also just throw in, I know in 2022, it's not shown here because it's a smaller project compared to the TOLT 2 supply line, but we do have 200,000 designated for water main improvements. And then the larger new water main building is a much more extensive project that we show further down the line. But we do have a more recent 2022 project budgeted in there.
And this was a newer item that we definitely looked at making it, because this wasn't how we previously accounted for maintenance and housing staff. To your point, Councilmember Naplin, that was something we wanted to kind of write in this is, hey, there's a real cost to putting everybody in a seat somewhere and paying for the accoutrements that go with having them somewhere, and so we needed to account for that across the organization. So that's kind of why we threw in this water department building. It's not really fair. It doesn't mean it's going to be just for the water department, but it's a share of a facility, ideally.
Wangle, your hand is up.
Councilmember.
Can you not hear us? Dorothy, can you hear us?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm developing a list of all the things we need to do. And one of the things that I thought occurred to me is when was the last time that we as a council looked at things like the GFC and in the context of the overall impact fee strategy that we have? I couldn't remember. I mean, you've done a lot of work, Steve, in updating, in a more effective way, the kinds of rates we charge for whether it's for parks or moving dirt. But I didn't remember that one, at least not in my 18 months on council. So where are we with these various fees? Because development is one time, and lots of things can slow development, as the consultants have pointed out. So where are we on all of that?
Not answering your question directly, because I know we talked about that with Toggy and Murray Smith, so I'm not sure if John has all the insight. The one thing that we have understood to be the case, and council as a group certainly would set that policy and correct us if we're wrong, but we as an agency want to make sure that growth is paying for growth, right? So
Right.
We were looking at toying with rates and maximizing, because you heard Tuggy say, or John say, we were looking at some of the rate revenue to help with capitalized costs, but then growth paying for its share. we want to make sure our rates could be pushed as low as possible relative to GFCs being maximized to the fully extent, representative as well as, legitimate. And we are, I think Toggy put it, very maxed out. So we want to make sure we can lower rates at the cost of the future growth than when we try to, but we're balanced well, and we're pretty far down on the eligibility. I think it's 14% is capitalized rate share. So it's a pretty low share. So that doesn't answer your system-wide question you asked, but in our theories, right, we are growth pace for growth agency until somebody says otherwise. And I don't know if Laura's got a total amount hand me, but we hear it all the time on what a permit costs us, or as a developer would say, a home builder, what a permit costs them each. It's, cost of business is fairly high.
That's a business.
I think if I could add one thing, I can speak in general terms. I know that we've done multiple iterations of updates going as far back as maybe even 15 or 20 years. So I know that the city has remained fairly current as it completes system plans, it updates those charges. And that's one of the reasons that the picture looks so good in our view, is because the city has been forward thinking and planned well. So the charges have kept pace.
Yeah, I just, I guess, I think where I'm coming on this is that we have some very important projects that, at least I for sure, I think other council members understand, that are either inevitable or desirable. And we're trying to look at two major water investments, systems investments for the long run right now. And we don't have an overall context for those important things relative to everything else we have to do. And so on the wastewater treatment, they were saying, we have legitimate to increase our impact fees pretty substantially. So if we want to get ahead on that one, we should probably be looking at our impact fees sooner than later, things like that. And that's the origin of my question, really. And I do think that, and we have a great city service here, water, public works, certainly police. And if you want that type of service, then you buy into Duval and what that means, I think.
Yes, sorry, this is Rick. My mic is on. Yeah, I just want to second my support for having GFCs pay their fair share. Now, the question is, what does fair share really mean? And I know none of us have a true answer to that, but nonetheless, as far as future major capital investments are needed, as far as even reserve money is needed to keep our quality of service up and protect our community. I think it's perfectly fair to ask developers as they come in to have some of those costs on their shoulders. And if that means increasing GFC fees on our part, which I think it would, by the way, but I'm perfectly happy to consider that. I do recall, I think other communities, Carnation's the one I'm thinking of. I think they have a higher GFC fee level than Duval does. So it's certainly not unheard of for fees to increase more than what they currently are here.
Thank you, Rick. Questions from other council members? I don't see any hands up. I've got a couple I wanted to ask myself. One was on the GFC as well, but I think we probably looked at that pretty well. I just wanted to confirm the capital costs include our vehicles, the dump trucks, backhoes. Some of that stuff gets pretty expensive, and it makes sense it's in there, but I didn't see it and just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, it's all in there.
Great, thank you. The comparison list, I like the comparison list, but I was curious if we know which of those cities are part of the Seattle public utility and which might have their own wells or pulling out of rivers, which has its own set of issues. And some of those cities were quite a bit higher than ours. And so I was just curious if we were really comparing apples to apples instead of just rough size of city.
Okay, I'm going to know a few of these. Steve, do you happen to know? You're getting all the questions.
We definitely know North Bend is has its own system, I believe.
However, they do have an intertie with SPUs for a certain block and emergent needs, and they have their own water issues right now too, right? So
Correct. Sultan, I believe, has their diversion off that dam from Everett Water. So not SPU, but a purveyor type system. I
So
believe.
Sean, I know a little bit because I'm in Snohomish County, and I worked for the city of Sultan. So Sultan has their own water source, and they have city of Everett. So they have two sources of water. Monroe comes off only the Everett. I'm not sure about Snohomish. My guess is they come off of Everett water as well.
Well, that's helpful. Like you say, systems or towns that have their own systems often cost more. They can be quite costly to maintain. And salaries, I'm just curious, it sounds like that, trying to figure out what it costs for employees and adding FTEs, full-time equivalent employees, that was all costed in as well. I'm always curious about how we try to figure out 10 years because we never know what inflation looks like, but there's averages. So I think we probably look at the average and it falls in line with what would just say is reasonable.
Yeah, we actually look at historical inflators, as that seems to be the best predictor. We use labor inflation for salary costs. We use benefits inflators for benefits costs. I mean, we really do try to break it down as specifically as we can. And of course, we know that we're going to be wrong because no matter what we forecast, reality will be different, but we have used historical rates as well as we can to forecast what those costs will look like in the future.
Great. Well, we sure appreciate your being here tonight. I really enjoyed just getting to see some of those early numbers. Look forward to seeing some of those as they get nailed down going forward. We've got a lot of our questions here, just part of it are getting educated, part of our wanting to make sure that our rates are correct, that construction is paying for its part with the GFC. And again, it's not easier for us as council members to be able to nail that down perfectly, but certainly wanting our rates to be reasonable for our citizens is a big part. But we don't want it to be overshadowed by the fact that one of the key things is we want safe, reliable drinking water. And this plan looks like it's, making sure financially to a good part, we can afford the things we need moving into the future. And I will say, I really appreciated seeing that we were going to up our reserves. I think with our size system, it made sense to do that.
Mayor Pro Tem Remington, may I add one more thing?
Oh, yes. Go ahead, John.
Perfect. I just wanted to mention, I know that you guys didn't receive this presentation until earlier. We wanted to make sure that FCS Group had a chance to present the information and provide some context, and then lots of chance for review. We have ample opportunity for discussion and questions moving forward. So Chapter 10 will be also a product that is produced by FCS Group, and then Murray Smith. That's not done yet. We don't even have a draft Chapter 10. You guys will also be provided that soon. I know you have chapters 1 through 9 right now. So again, we're giving to you what we have to digest and to spend time with. We're not pushing forward quick decisions. So there'll be lots of opportunity to discuss. And if you guys have questions, make sure we're forwarding them on. We're happy to address things. Again, we know you might find something that you read a passage or paragraph that you just want to talk about. And so that's part of our plan with having multiple opportunities for discussion and touch over the next month or so or more, whatever it takes to get comfortable. So
yeah.
What's in Chapter 10, Sean?
Chapter 10 is the financial plan. So it's just a more of a narrative of this presentation. Mm-hmm. So it has lots of these same tables, same information, and again, it's just a narrative format.
Good.
Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your being here tonight and being patient while we were at our executive session. You're welcome to stay with our meeting if you like, but I'm guessing you're probably ready to have a night off here for a little bit.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sean. When I printed up our agenda, I've got ethics on there. I thought we had bumped that to our next meeting. Is that right? Councilmember Hogue, can you just confirm that we were going to
Yes.
sometime next month?
Councilmember McHenry and I met with Daniel, and he's going to give us some suggested changes. So we'll try and bring that back to you.
Great. Well, let's jump to good of the order then, or go back to it. I'll just ask if council has anything for good of the order. I've got a few items to share, but I'll open it up to everyone else first. Councilmember Hogue.
So I was wondering if the council could have a discussion on whether or not to record committees, because I feel like the whole council as a whole should make that decision and not just individual committees making that decision. So I just wanted to kind of bring it up and see if we could discuss it at some point.
Yeah, we will. The actual rule we have now is that we will. So the mayor pointed out when I asked the question with one of the committees whether we wanted to, that it actually our rule says we will. But I do want to bring that back for a council discussion. When I look at how many of our citizens actually look at council meetings and COW meetings, it's pretty small. And when you look at those that go on YouTube to take a look at committee meetings, usually it's just me. So anyway, that doesn't mean it's not important. I think we need to look at it. I do think it ought to be standardized. I think what we're going to be discussing is the importance to be transparent in everything that we do, which is a primary thing that we, really focused on, that our citizens always have a right to watch exactly what we're doing and be a part of those discussions. Mostly that's done through council meetings. The COW, they can certainly see kind of the background. A lot of cities don't record those meetings. The only drawback, well, there's a couple. Part of it is the time and energy it takes. It's not hard to push a button, but it does have to get from whatever platform you're using, in our case, Zoom, and get it over to YouTube. So anyway, I'm not pushing one way or the other. I think it'll be a good discussion for now. The procedure we have in place, the direction, the policy we have is that formal council committees will be recording their meetings. Councilmember McHenry.
Just a clarification on that. When you say record, is the current standing that it's the audio recording, it's not video?
It can be either. One of the things we're working on is updating in fact, that was our next item, council procedures. The challenge is ours are kind of outdated, and with Zoom meetings and pandemics and new types of technology, we're a bit behind. Even the state legislatures racing to catch up to new technology. But I think that being able to at least minimum have an audio recording. Most of our meetings are on Zoom. It's easy to do both, but that's part of our discussion, I think. Mayor Okerlander.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that provision is for audio recording only. That was before we started videotaping council meetings and what have you. And the purpose of, again, was part of the background on that, because that's one of the rules I wrote, is because you did have prior council committees meeting at 6 o'clock in the morning without public access, and making sure that people have an opportunity to, if they do want to go back and listen to what actually happened, that they have the opportunity to do it. So right now it is audio recording. I've mentioned this to staff numerous times, that, from my perspective, it's in the procedures. So staff needs to follow the procedures unless the committee votes to not follow those procedures. And there should be a record of it, simply because that's, just like suspending the rules on the 3-touch rule. And so that's what I've directed them to do at this point until the procedures are updated.
Those all become public records, which have to be managed, and they're, those go on for an awful long time. So there is a management and using up some of our own computer system as well. But so be thinking about it yourself, how you would like to do that. Like I say, right now, that is part of our procedure. I do believe all committees ought to be doing it the same way. But we're kind of in between right now, trying to work through it, just because of technology. Other thoughts on that? Councilmember Langle.
Actually, I'm hoping this is okay to bring up for the good of the order. I have a question about one of the things on the consent agenda, and it's not to take it off the consent agenda. It's just a clarifying question. Is that okay for me to ask at this time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I see where we need to purchase something for the seal, the crack sealer, blah, 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 blah. And I went back and looked at the CIP, but I didn't see it listed. And I remember the discussion about anything over a certain dollar amount, Dana's going to put in the CIP. So I just wanted to get clarification if that was something that was budgeted already. Because if it wasn't in the budget, then I want to keep track of it as things get moved around in the budget, because that's really the only way you can track reconciliation as you're going along in the course of the first half of the year. So is that in the budget? Was that already part of your budget?
Here, Steve, do you know if that, I honestly can't remember if that specific, so this is a crack sealer for roads. We've all seen them out there helping to preserve our roads, and we're purchasing a new one. It's of the level that it's obviously coming to council. I don't think there's any concern with it. So it was just, I think, on consent. But do we know if it was in the budget as a physical item we were purchasing?
Steve, you can answer that.
He may have hopped off for just a moment.
Yeah, if Steve's off, we did talk about this in the Public Works meeting, and my understanding is, yes, it's in the budget. I don't think it's an add-on. I don't think it's a surprise. I think it's been planned on by Steve and his crew. I think we have good justification as far as the maintenance on our roads and helping preserve our roads for it will be more than pay for the cost of the machine and running the machine.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with having it and even it being on the consent agenda. It just wasn't something that the rest of us, because it wasn't on the CIP list. I checked because I have my budget book and all organized and everything. So it wasn't on the CIP list. So that's why I asked the question.
Okay.
I mean, it could easily be somewhere else in the budget. It just wasn't listed on CIP.
Sure.
Wyckoff.
I just wanted to mention that on the agenda bill itself in the finance section, it does say that it was approved in the budget, and it does list the bars number that it was budgeted from and how much it was budgeted for. So I think your answer is yes, it was budgeted.
Yeah, I just didn't see it on the CIP list. And I knew it was an amount that would have otherwise been there. So I'm just keeping track of CIP.
Councilmember Naplin.
That answers the question.
I agree with Councilmember Lingle. I think the intention is that purchases over a certain dollar amount, if they're represented in the budget somewhere, they need to be listed as a capital purchase. And because, there's big dollar amounts all over the place in individual account numbers. We don't know what is in them. And so the idea is that a large capital purchase would be listed so we would know which large purchases to expect. And so I agree with Councilmember Lingle that if something wasn't disclosed as a large purchase that would come up, that perhaps it would have different handling. You know what I mean? It would be something, hey, we didn't list this on the capital purchase. We need to spend $40,000 on something. Even if there was an account that had a general budget that they could shift things around and come up with the money in an existing budget, the idea is that large purchases are called out in the budget, not just in some other line item that you don't know it's there.
Capital budget.
That's what Dorothy is trying to express. And
yeah, and this really sticks with me because there was a specific discussion about how Dana constructs a capital purchase as part of the CIP. And that's, I mean, part of her training, I guess, of us is I go to the CIP to see if something's on the CIP so I can keep track of the CIP. So I'm fine with the expenditure. It's just making sure that it's not going to have any other budget implications when we come to mid-year.
Director Mason obviously isn't here tonight, but that's certainly something that we can pass on to her, and almost more procedural, but a very important point that these high-priced items are listed in our CIP. We're used to seeing some pretty large items in there, but and this one I think came out over $50,000 total. So I think the actual price lower, but it seemed like there was other cost with it. Was I looking, Steve, when you go like this, it looks like I got something wrong. Am I off by 20 grand? What? That was a 20 grand look right there.
Well, it's certainly 20%, but it kind of, the audio died on a little bit. So I think you're talking about the crack seal machine. It is a direct line item in the equipment fund. If you look in the year breakdown, just pulling it up. We budgeted 43, which it showed in the agenda bill. And we're at 42,000 and I think $9 or something. But it was a specific line identifying the crack seal machine on the trying to find the specific fund. And if you notice in the budget, whatever document I have, it goes from like it goes numerically, then we hit 500s, and 503 comes before 502 and 501. So I always get twisted around here.
So Steve, I think the point that we were making was that these large ticket items over, certainly at that amount over 40,000, that we like to see it on that CIP list. I don't know if that makes sense, but it just allows council to kind of keep track of what's coming. And, no one has any concern. I haven't heard any concern about the purchase or, or even the cost. It was just a procedural piece in the way we track things in the budget. Okay, well, I think we can move on to other items for good of the order.
Question?
Director?
Yeah, so I guess some CIP lists are specific. The streets fund doesn't really have a CIP list. So when it's simply identified on the table, is that kind of the sufficient? And I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah, Councilmember Naplin.
So I just wanted to mention, because Dana and I went back and forth, because they're inside the procurement policy currently, if a piece of equipment or a vehicle is listed on the capital equipment in the list of the budget, then you don't need approval from council. So Dana was like, I don't know what you mean. And the budget that we adopted did not have that section that we have had in the past. And if you look at our budget from the year prior, there was a list of capital equipment purchases. And so, I mean, we can, do that in the future, but in the past, there was a section, very specific section that got adopted that showed not just the capital projects, but also the capital purchases. It listed the 3 police vehicles, the vehicle for the city hall, the vehicle for public works, bought a couple trucks. All of those were listed. That was not done for this budget. It just wasn't. But in the past, that's how those items have been explicitly disclosed. And yes, you're right. If you go and look at the line item and dig, you might be able to find it, but that's not what Councilmember Langle is talking about. She's talking about a very specific list of capital equipment or vehicle expenditures.
I think we have made that point pretty clear, and one that, like I say, it's almost how we procedurally line things up in the budget. I agree. I mean, we usually see vehicles in there. They certainly meet that capital purchase for equipment or vehicle. But I think having other large equipment on there would be helpful for council, even if it's there in other areas of the budget. Nice to have a list that just says, hey, here's the big stuff we're buying. And I can talk to Dana if that's okay, Mayor, just to see how that might get lined up. I don't think that's a big issue. We don't have very many of these large equipment purchases, but we can certainly make sure that we help identify those and that they really are easy to see in the budget. There's a lot of line items in there. Councilmember Langle.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the beauty of being as a council person, being able to open the CIP list, I'll just use that because we do have some equipment listed in the CIP. This just happens to not be something that was. Okay, fine. But the beauty of it for me is when I see something like that on the consent agenda, I go to my budget book and I see if it's, on the list, and then it makes total sense why it's on the consent agenda. See what I'm saying? And so the more we align these documents, the easier I think it'll be to have things on the consent agenda, which should be all of our goals to keep things moving a little bit. So that, I'm not trying to make something too big. That's just what I was doing. I was just checking the CIP list.
Great.
And so, yeah, I'm glad it's in there. And that means I don't have to worry about it as a future budget adjustment.
Usually at home, I just go to my wife, Sue, and she tells me it's either okay or don't even think about it. So other items for good of the order, Council? Well, I'll jump in with a few. So each of us is required once a year to do a Public Disclosure Commission form, which goes into some of our financial background. For Councilmember Schaefer, who's new, usually you have about a couple weeks to be able to get that paperwork done. I don't know if we've gone through that with you, Rick, since you're just new on council, but we can certainly do that. It's fairly easy to do. It's all online. For council members who have that due, and I believe it's all of us, it really is the best way to do it. And by the way, it's due April 15th, so we have some time here. But you can go to apollo.pdc.wa.gov. Apollo is APOLLO, and that will has a link in there to say, am I signing up new? Am I just redoing the form? And you can literally have it bring in all your information from a year ago, so you don't have to redo everything every time. I did it today and it seemed pretty simple. So this is just a reminder. We're going to be talking later about the growth management survey. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for council members and staff that participated. I think that's well done. I think it'll provide some really good information from our citizens, and look forward to seeing that go out. Another item, we talked about chamber membership at our last meeting. Councilmember Schaefer had offered to be the representative. I talked to City Clerk Jody Wyckoff. She is working on getting one membership for City Council. Certainly the mayor has one already, and the city clerk will sign up Councilmember Schaefer for that position. And then yearly, when we talk about assignments, we can take a look to see if someone else wants to do that. I just want to remind any our citizens that are listening, we do have a couple of council members who have their own businesses. They join separately, so there's no conflict of interest or there's a confusion about, are they representing their business or city council? We just wanted that to be really clear, and Councilmember Schaefer will be our representative there with the chamber.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. I'm looking forward to that. I think I saw an update from you, Jody, today. I think the first meeting, the next meeting, I should say, that I'll attend is sometime in early March. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I'm going to take about 60 seconds, cover our last item, so we can take a 15-minute break before our council meeting. The simple part of this is that our council procedures were last updated in June of 2015. Jody Wyckoff has been encouraging us to work on those. There's several areas in there that need updating, recording meetings, order of business at meetings. We've talked about changing that a little bit to give citizens more opportunity for some feedback before we make decisions, or get to hear us and then get to hear from them so they know what we're talking about. So there's a bit to be done on that. Communication and correspondence is another section that needs updating. A big one on council committees. We're really into those now. We've learned a lot, and it's time to update that section. Attendance via Zoom, something new. Again, that section needs to be updated. And then there's a Appendix A, which is parliamentary procedures. Really, that most of that is to do with Robert Rules of Order. I only bring that section up, not because it needs updating, but every time I read it, I realize that I do kind of a C- job sometimes of running meetings. So anyway, that's a section that we could probably all review. And that's it. It's something that we're going to bring to council. I'll take a first stab, work with Jody on updating some of those sections, run it by administration, and then we'll bring it to council for all of your input before we make any formal changes on it. So with that, council, that's all I had. If everybody's good to go, we'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting, and we'll see you over at City Council at 7 o'clock. Thank you, everyone.
That's good.
Thank you.